Hello, I'm Charlie Thurman with Kentucky Sports Legends, and we've got a sports legend here today that we've had the pleasure of spending a little time with here the last few days, Mr. Joe Dan Gold from Benton, Kentucky. Joe Dan had quite a high school career here in Benton back in the 50s, went on to play collegiate basketball at Mississippi State, was on some SEC championship teams, and has played, kind of set a record in 1963 that we'll get into later, playing in the NCAA tournament. We're here in Benton in Marshall County. The Marshall County had their first inaugural Hall of Fame induction last night. And Joe Dan was one of the inductees, and it was our pleasure to be here to witness that. We've had a great time down here. It was wonderful ceremonies last night, and we're going to take a little time and spend with Joe Dan and talk a little bit about his career here and growing up in Benton. We'll go down and talk a little bit about his career at Mississippi State and what he's been doing since he left Mississippi State. Joe Dan, it's great having you here today. Tell us a little bit. We've been doing some documentaries on Western Kentucky basketball, and we've been fortunate enough to spend some time down in Cuba and Murray and a little town here pretty close to you called Brewers. And the more we get into it, the history of Western Kentucky basketball is pretty incredible. Going all the way back to the 20s and 30s. The 1938 Sharp team won the state tournament here. The 1948 Brewers team won the state tournament. So you have as much history in basketball in the state of Kentucky probably as any part of the country. And you grew up in the middle of all that history. I know you had to know Cuba's not very many miles from here. Brewers is right down the road from you here. So you had to know all these legendary players and teams. Tell us a little bit about growing up here, how you got started in basketball, and what was your first experience. And I know some of these guys said they had to walk 3 to 5 to 7 to 8 miles a day to go to school. Probably in the 1950s you might have had a little bit better facilities, and I believe you growing up in Benton was a little bit larger community than some of the smaller ones around here.
Well, actually, I didn't grow up in Benton.
Okay.
Actually, I grew up out near Fair Dealing, Maple Springs, about 8 miles out of Benton. And I came from my first year in school. I got to start school when I was 5 years old because all my friends went to school that year, and I was able to start. My granddad was on the school board. I don't know whether that had anything to do with it or not. But I went to a one-room schoolhouse in Maple Springs Elementary School. And so I don't remember too much about that first year. I remember I got to sing on the radio, WCBL, and I had about 4 different teachers that year. But it was a typical one-room schoolhouse. And so the second grade, we had a brand new school, Fair Dealing Elementary School. And it wasn't until the 6th grade. Now, I heard Barney talk earlier about playing out on the outdoor court. We had a couple of games on the outdoor court, and that's all we had until I was in the 6th grade. And we got a brand new gymnasium that was added on to Fair Dealing Elementary. And came to school one day.
So you had an elementary school with the gymnasium?
With the gymnasium in the 6th grade when they started. And Miss Cherry was our principal, and found out that they were going to start a basketball team. Man, I was excited, 6th grader. And so we had tryouts, and the mothers, they had to get a t-shirt. They sewed on numbers on our jerseys. We had little light blue t-shirts and white shorts, and I picked Vanderbilt was the only school we could get TV games. We could barely get a fuzzy picture out of Nashville.
What year was this?
That would have been, let's see, that in the 6th grade, I guess I would have been, I started school in 57, I guess, so that'd been about 53.
53, okay.
And so I was number 23. I was Bobby Timms' number. I remember Bobby Timms well. Al Rochelle played on that
Yes.
team, who's very much a legend in West Kentucky. But anyway, I'm in the 6th grade. We had some 7th and 8th graders. And about a week before school started, we got our white shorts and our T-shirts with a number on them. Well, 2 of the 8th graders decided that they wasn't going to play in their underwear. We'd always played on the outdoor courts with blue jeans, you know, or long pants. So they quit the team, and as a 6th grader, I got to start on the Fair Dealing Elementary first basketball team that I ever had out there as a 6th grader, because 2 8th graders quit the team.
Because they didn't want to wear shorts.
They didn't want to wear any underwear. Yeah, they said something like, you know, well, I'm not going to show everything I got, you know, and I guess 6th graders didn't have anything to show. I don't know. Anyway, that's how I got my basketball career started.
Well, tell us a little bit about that first team.
Well, we on that first team, I really don't remember too much. I mean, we went around and played. I do remember going to Faxon Elementary School, which was up in Callaway County, and they had a pot-bellied stove right there in the middle of the half court
In half court.
and also was concrete floor. I mean, flat out concrete floor. So I remember playing that. Other than that, I don't remember too much about that. One other thing about the gymnasium, they had beams across the free throw line, across the half court line, on both ends, of course, free throw. So if you were dead in front, you kind of had to shoot a flat shot. You couldn't really, unless you arched it through the beams, you couldn't do it through the beams, yeah. But I always talked about how I shot the ball a little bit flat, and that's probably the reason that I didn't shoot the nice high floating arch. I was more of a line drive shooter.
So from elementary, then now where did you start your high school?
Well, I played 6th, 7th, and 8th, and then the students from the area that I lived in, all the way from Aurora to Benton, there on Highway 68 and 408, the county sent us to Benton High School my first 2 years. We had North Marshall was just consolidated, had consolidated Cowart City and Sharp. Brewers and Hardin was still had not been consolidated yet. So my first 2 years I went to Benton High School, and that's where I was supposed to go, the county secondary. South Marshall was built between my sophomore and my junior year, and consolidated Brewers and Hardin. And they had a new school. And that actually was the district I was supposed to go to. But because I'd already been there 2 years, knew the players, knew the coach, because Billy Joe Ferris, I wanted to continue going over there. And my parents paid tuition, and I was able to go my last 2 years there. And of course, I knew we were going to have a good team too. We had some good basketball teams during that stretch also.
Joe Dan, when did you start on the varsity at Benton? What year was your first year start on the varsity?
My first year was as a junior. My sophomore year, we were something like 30-1 or 30-2 during the regular season. I mean, we had a really good basketball team.
And that would
and I didn't
57?
start. That would have been 57.
Okay.
I didn't start that year, but I played some, and that was the first year that we got invited to the LIT, and went up and played in the Louisville Invitational Tournament. Played, I think, Flegier in the first round and won, and then played Louisville Central. And that was one of the first years that I think the primarily black schools had joined KHSAA, I think. It's either 56 or 57, but anyway, that was my first experience playing against black players.
I think it was 57. So Louisville Central played in the LIT in 57.
In 57, and we played them, and I remember a little bit, of course, for 3 quarters it was a real close game. We were down 5 or something like that at the end of 3 quarters, and I don't remember too much. I got to play in the game a little bit, and I remember going into the game about halfway through the first quarter and playing into the second quarter, and then I was taken out. And I do remember getting out and getting about, 10 steps from Louisville Central's bench. I was going to the wrong bench. So with that type of mindset, I probably wasn't too effective in that game. I don't remember much about the game except I almost went to the wrong bench and sat down on Louisville Central's bench. I do remember that.
And did you wind? Now, who was your head coach?
Our head coach was Billy Joe Ferris.
Okay.
And that year, like I said, we were one of the better teams in the region. We lost the first game of the district to Brewers, as a matter of fact. A guy named Harold Wilkins, who went on to a great career at Murray State, he had a great game against us, and we lost in the first game of the district that year.
And Brewers didn't wind up going to the state.
No, Brewers, they weren't one of the top teams probably, but they had a really good, he was a really great player. And then my junior year, we got to go to the state tournament. And
a little bit about that.
We were one of the better teams that year. Again, we kind of had a match. Sedalia had a couple of great big Guthrie twins. They were probably 6'8" or so, some of the bigger guys in the first region. And we beat them. Coach Ferris had them come to Benton, so we played Benton, instead of playing there. But anyway, we beat them. And we beat North Marshall in the finals of the regional tournament that year. And went to the state. Charlie Lamp was coach. Pat Doyle, all the group of the 59, most of them were back. Most of them were juniors that year.
They were
Doyle
juniors
and Larimer and Jerry Powell and Orange.
They had a heck of a ball club themselves that year, right?
They were real good that year too.
Yeah.
Yes, they were. And I think we split with them in the regular season probably. And I can't really remember, but I know that they were real good and they got all the way. I mean, they're in the
But
same.
you beat them in the finals of the regional.
Finals of the regional
58.
To go to the state tournament. We went and played Davies County, Bobby Rasco. And we lost in the first game.
What kind of game was that?
We didn't play very well. I think we were awed by the thing. We hadn't been there before. We didn't have a very good ball game, really. I think individually I had a fairly good ball game. I maybe scored 15, 16 points. But overall, I do know I was scared to death. Again, I remember shooting the first shot, I think, and I was in the left side. I think it probably hit the top right-hand corner or somewhere close over there. I was a little excited and juiced up with that playing in the state tournament.
Yeah, and was this in Memorial or was in
This was in Memorial.
It was in Memorial.
This was in
Lexington.
Memorial in Lexington, yes.
So
That
probably
would
your
have been
first
58.
trip. Yeah, first trip away from home, big Coliseum, and
Well, we had been to, like I said, we'd been to
LIT.
LIT. We'd been to LIT, and so we were fairly seasoned. We had a couple of seniors on that club. We actually had 3 senior starters. We had a guy named J.D. Gamble, who went to Mississippi State a year before I did, had some connections in Mississippi, some relatives down there, and had a guy named Paul Daly who went to Middle Tennessee, and then had another guy that was a guard for us, that one named Monty Peck. Were seniors, and I started as a junior, and we had a small guard named Joe David Duke that started as a junior. So,
but 3 of you off that ball club played major college ball.
actually, one other one who was a sophomore, a boy named Kenny Peak, who was about 6'6", he wound up getting a scholarship to Middle Tennessee also. So we actually had 4 players off that played. And we were pretty big. We were 6'7", 6'6", a couple 6'5". That's a pretty big ball club back then.
It was. So you get beat in the first round, and Davis County's got a pretty good ball club over there themselves.
A little guy named Bobby Rasco played for him, and pretty good. I haven't liked Rasco since, I don't think, but yeah.
Well, then you go into your senior year. You got don't have everybody back, but you got another good ball club your senior year.
Absolutely. We thought we would have a chance to go back to the state tournament, and I still think we were going to be of the same caliber as North Marshall, but Kenny Peak, who was a 6'6" guy that was a junior, hurt his knee after about 2 games, and he missed the whole season, got back, played in the district and the regional tournament. And We had a young man, a guy named Roy Cochran, who played at Lyon County. And of course, that was kind of during the time they were building Lake Barkley, and ran some of the people out over there, you know, and he moved over and had thought he moved into the Benton district, but he actually was just outside the district, and so he was ruled ineligible with KHSAA for the first semester. And he was a real good player, real good guard, could play, and so he didn't get to play until the second semester in January sometime, and that hurt our chemistry a little bit, people blending in and out, injuries. Make a long story short, North Marshall beat us 5 times that year, beat us twice in regular season, once in the Christmas tournament, and then beat us in the district tournament and the regional tournament. So, as I said last night at the induction ceremonies, I've never really quite believed they were totally better than we were. But after 50 years, and they did win the state championship and had Mr. Basketball and Pat Doyle, so they may have been a little better than we were that year.
And a pretty decent coach themselves.
Charlie Lampley,
that's a great point, Joe Dan. Last night, while you being inducted into the Marshall County Hall of Fame, Pat Doyle was inducted into the Marshall County, and Charlie Lampley.
Absolutely.
Two great honors, and what a pleasure to be there to see that. And two, in addition to yourself, 2 additional deserving people to go into the Hall of Fame over there.
No question about that. Charlie Lampley, I always appreciate him, and the interesting thing is that Charlie Lampley coached my younger brother at South Marshall High School. After he came back to Marshall County and coached again, he coached my younger brother at South Marshall High School.
You've gotten, even though you didn't get to go back to the state tournament, one of your teams that you competed with 5 times that year, and you knew intimately for certain, and as high school kids, we all got that competitive spirit, but once you've lost and you're out, then you're pulling for, and I'm sure you pulled for North Marshall. You knew everybody there.
No question about it. I mean, knew those players and played against them in baseball and basketball. Those were the only sports we had. But I did go to the state tournament that year. That was the first year I'd ever been to the state tournament, except the year before when we went. So, a boy named Joe David Duke, I went up with his parents, and so I was able to see North Marshall win the state championship. And
was that that was in Freedom Hall, I believe, in '59. Was it in Lexington?
It was in Lexington also. In Freedom Hall that year, they had the finals of the NCAA at about the same time.
Right.
Just about the same time as that was going on.
What did you play in any All-Star games after your senior year? I was thinking that maybe you didn't get selected to play in the.
I didn't get selected to play in the East-West game. And after about either one day of practice or something, they called me. Coach Lampley, actually, Charlie Lampley called me. He was an assistant coach there. And he called me and asked me if I could come up and join the team, but I had kind of a summer job and was working. I wasn't able to get off to, I had prior, my folks always got me to practice and got me to the games and allowed me to play athletics. But I couldn't go because actually I wasn't selected, and then it was a couple of days after practice started.
What, of course, we know you wound up at Mississippi State. Tell us a little bit about who recruited you, who talked to you. Give us a little bit about that, and then how you wound up picking and selecting Mississippi State to go to school at.
Well, actually, after my junior year, when I played in the state tournament, I got a couple letters from UK and that type of thing, But they never really recruited me, and I certainly would have probably gone to UK if I'd had the opportunity. But at that time, you had to go up Old 68 and go through Bowling Green and Hopkinsville and all the way up, and it took about 7 hours to get to Lexington from here. Also, the year before, I mentioned J.D. Gamble.
Mm-hmm.
He had gone to Mississippi State the year before, and so I was aware of Mississippi State. Mississippi State won the SEC that year in 1959. And so I was aware they had a good program. Murray State recruited me more than anyone else. Vandy a little bit. Tennessee Tech, John Oldham recruited me some. So I wasn't heavily recruited. But Coach McCarthy, Babe McCarthy, who, if you ever was around him, he was a great salesman. Could charm the parents or anybody else. And so after he came, that's absolutely where my dad wanted me to go. And my mother, she liked him there. She'd kind of like me to stay a little closer to home, maybe to Murray, but she liked Mississippi State. She loved Coach McCarthy. So I was fortunate to get a scholarship down there. It's a tough decision. I thought a lot about going to Murray, but they had a good program. Coach Luther had recruited me pretty hard. And at that time, they kind of had a little bit of a reputation of getting a lot of out-of-state players. They didn't have a whole lot of local players, although they did have a guy named Gene Herndon from Alamo, Kentucky, that was a local player. But anyway, I went to Mississippi State, and of course, it turned out to be one of the greater decisions that I ever made.
But, Joe Dan, and so your first year at Mississippi State, 1960.
59.
Or 59. In fall of 59, of course, in 59, Mississippi State had won the SEC.
Right.
They had a couple of players on there, pretty decent ball players. Some guy named Bailey Howe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Bailey wasn't a senior that year, though, I don't believe, was he? Was he a sophomore? Or?
No, Bailey was a senior in 59.
Okay, that was his last year.
Bailey was his last year, and
Okay.
and they, of course, won the SEC, beat Kentucky at Mississippi State. I remember sitting and listening to that game, and to be honest,
Cowbells.
I wasn't pulling for Mississippi State in that game when I was in high school. You know, I was pulling for UK. I was upset when Mississippi State beat them, even though JD was down there, but he was on the freshman team at that time. So Bailey played. They had a guy named Jerry Graves who wound up being a great player also, and just had a good ball club.
And they had and Babe was putting a nice program together.
Yes, absolutely.
A great program. So you go down your freshman years, 1960. Tell us a little bit about that, and Babe had added a couple more players in there to come in with you. So tell us a little bit about that freshman year.
Well, actually, we had 7 scholarship players. And
7 scholarship players.
Scholarship players.
Pretty
and
good.
we were freshmen, couldn't play on the varsity. But the varsity was a little bit down that year. Of course, they lost Bailey Howell, and they lost 4 seniors that had played for 3 or 4 years, about 2 or 3 years as starters. So they lost a significant group of talent that in 59. And we would scrimmage the varsity and hold our own. We had a good group of players that came in there. That's one thing that I was fortunate with. We had a guy out of Arkansas that was Mr. Basketball, and he wound up leaving. He didn't start on the freshman team. A guy named Mr. Basketball in Mississippi, and he wound up being a starter on the freshman team. But anyway, out of those 7, we had 2 of them left at the end of the first year. So we wound up having the 5 guys who went all the way through my college career, and we were 21-0 as freshmen, and then either won or shared the league title, and would have been the representative to go to the NCAA tournament all 3 years that I was in school.
62,
and 63, yes.
Well, tell us those 5 players, yourself, and who was the other 4?
A guy named Leland Mitchell, who was all SEC a couple of years, played a couple of years in the ABA, and a guy named W.D. Redstrap, great shooter, was the most valuable player in as his junior year, I think, in the SEC. We also a guy who was ahead of us one year, a guy named Jack Berkshire, who was captain of the 62 team and 61 and 62 team, and was voted the best defensive player in the SEC. So we had some good players. We were very well balanced. My senior year, all 5 players averaged in double figures. My junior year, 4 averaged, and Jack Berkshire, who was the best defensive player, he distributed the ball. He was truly a point guard before they had kind of called him point guards. So, you know, they usually played 2 guards, but he was the point guard and ran the show and played the defense and got the ball to the guy that was scoring that night.
You won a big team. You were, was your tallest player 6'7"? I recall, but
We
you
had a
all
s-
had size.
We were 6'5", and I mean 6'7", that started in '62, and then in 1963, part of the time we had a 6'6" guy that started. So 6'6", a couple of 6'5s, maybe 6'1", and 5'11", 6 foot. We were not big, but we all handled the ball well, real well balanced. We could change positions. We actually, my last 2 years there, we went to the Auburn Shuffle, which shuffle interchanged players. You played different positions, and so we could all play as far as handling the ball, pass the ball, do the things that you wanted to, and we were a couple of fairly strong guys. I actually guarded the postman most of the time because I was a little stronger than the 6'6" guy who was thin, and then we did have a 6'7" guy who played a lot, and when he was there, he pretty much played something.
You didn't play an up-tempo, kind of played well, and the shuffle was just a control game, just play till you get the good shot, pass and move, and so let's go to your 61 team.
Mm-hmm.
You won the SEC.
Had 3 sophomore starters after about 6 or 7 ball games. I didn't start initially. Initially, they were going to redshirt me. I graduated from high school when I was 16 years old. I was 17 in June. So when I graduated from college, I was only 20. I was 21 after I graduated. So they were going to redshirt me. And for a couple of weeks during practice, I actually went down and practiced with the freshman team at night or at various times, and came back up, and I had one really good scrimmage. I don't know, against the varsity. I was on the second unit, and I don't know, I probably had 30-something in the scrimmage that we had. And after that, they decided that I might play some.
Maybe an 18-year-old could
play
with the
so
varsity.
they ordered me a uniform. My uniform came in about, I don't know, 2 or 3 days before the season started. I didn't get a uniform until then, and it was the 5th game of the year, I believe, that I first got my first start. It was against Murray State. And of course, I knew those Murray players, and then watched them in high school and knew a lot of them, and Gene Herndon was one of them. And
Cal Luther had recruited
yeah,
you.
had recruited me, and so after I got to start that game, and I had a pretty decent game, I think I had 16, 17 points, I decided at that time, up until then, I had no clue whether I could play college basketball or not. I mean, you know, I was a little small town Fairdealing. I didn't know whether I was a player or not. But after I played that team against players that I knew and everything, I thought, well, you know, maybe I can play in this college league. Maybe I'm going to be okay after all.
So you're starting your sophomore year, and really you're only 18 years old.
Yeah.
And you have a outstanding season. Did you win the SEC or did you tie with?
No, we won the SEC that year.
Outright.
We were something like 19-6. A little tidbit on that season. We had a guy named Jerry Graves, who was an All-American. He was our leading scorer, 20-something points a ball game. But Jerry was also, after the season was over, we found out that Jerry had been implicated in a so-called college point shaving scheme. Some guys from Tennessee, a guy named Fisher and another one, I think, some NYU players. But anyway, supposedly, now we won the SEC with Jerry. I don't know of any games that he threw or anything like that, and I can't really say yes or no, but he was implicated and did cooperate with the FBI, I think, in kind of some sting operations and that sort of thing. But Jerry was really an outstanding player, and after the season was over, we found out that the FBI had actually traveled with us on some of the games and been around, actually had taped some conversations that Jerry had on the phone. But we didn't know any of this, and we didn't know any of this till school was out. In May, it's the first time we knew anything about that. So we were 19-6, and I had a good ball club. Won our last 3 games. Won our last 2 games, and actually we lost at Ole Miss after we'd already clinched the SEC tournament. And at that time, we weren't going to the NCAA tournament, so The last game, maybe that would have been a game that some points were shaved or something, you know, I don't know, but that's the only game that I can remember that might have happened.
Well, I've got two questions on your 61 ball club. First off, what happened to Jerry?
Jerry wound up, like I said, he cooperated with the FBI and that type thing. He, of course, couldn't play professional
And he was
basketball
banned from
and never
the
did
NBA.
get banned from the NBA.
And certainly was an NBA player.
Absolutely, no question about it. And he wound up going into education and wound up having a good career, going back to his hometown, Lexington, Tennessee.
We have a lot of educators who've been banned from the NBA for gambling that make great educators.
Yes.
Well, to go on, now, to get back, you're 18 years old, but you played your first full season in SEC. You won the SEC tournament, which, growing up all around the SEC your entire life, you know this is no small feat. This is a big deal for you. What did it feel like not knowing, or did you know that if you won, you weren't going to play in the NCAA?
I really didn't know. I really had, you know, I guess I was naive. It hadn't registered on me till during that year that I figured out, you know, even though I knew Kentucky went to the NCAA and had won the NCAA, when I went to college, that wasn't on my radar screen, I guess. I just wanted to go and play basketball and get a scholarship and get a degree, and so I hadn't really, like I said, I didn't really picture myself up in that league necessarily. So during the year, it became evident that we were going to win the SEC, and you know, that's when I became aware that Mississippi State had kind of an unwritten law that they would not participate in tournaments or against black players. I think in 1956 or 57, Jones Junior College, I believe, down had put in a football team, had participated in one of those national junior college football bowls, and they had played against some black players on the opposing team. And then I believe in 1957, Bailey Howell's sophomore year, they were playing in Orangeburg, Kentucky. As it turns out, they had a Kentucky connection. And they won their first
Christmas tournament.
Yeah, in the Christmas tournament,
Kentucky
Western Christmas tournament, and they won their first game and was going to play against a team that Iona that had black players, and I didn't really remember who they were going to play against till you told me about it the other day. But anyway, the president of the university called and the athletic director and told them to come home. So they didn't play but the one game, and they forfeited and turned around and came back to Starkville. And so after that, even though in '59 when Bailey Howell I think they only lost one or two games in '59. Had a great ball club.
Yeah, great ball club.
And it kind of got the style of basketball that Coach McCarthy played at various times. I mean, and so they didn't go in '59, and so we knew we weren't going to go in '61 either, because even though there was some talk and Coach McCarthy expressed interest in going, we never thought that we might have a chance.
So in reality, in '61, you'd already started figuring out your hopes didn't get that high. You didn't think, you just said they ain't going to go.
SEC championship was our goal. We thought
that
that trophy was going to be our epitome as far as it. At least that was
Did this bother
much the
you at that
mindset.
time? Did you?
Well, you know, when you haven't been there, when you haven't had there, I was still pretty excited. Guy from Fairleigh, Kentucky. I was still excited to be in playing SEC basketball and SEC champions and getting to play Kentucky's and the Vanderbilts and the people that I had read about. So I guess I still wasn't, you know, I mean, I wanted to go play, but I wasn't necessarily totally disappointed.
Joe Dan, and I don't think you mentioned it, but were you not sophomore of the year in the SEC? Did you? Okay, I remember.
I was on the all-sophomore team.
You were on the all-sophomore team?
All three of our sophomores made the all-SEC,
Is that right?
all-sophomore team. We all averaged in double figures.
Yeah, that was
But
Heck of a
I
club of
didn't,
sophomores, wasn't it?
But yeah, it was a good group of sophomores that year.
So we got through 61, you won the SEC, big accomplishment. You're 18 years old, which is even bigger accomplishment, and you're going in and you got everybody coming back essentially. Except
We
Graves.
lost the one, well, Graves was gone and a couple other players, but we had 4 starters coming back, and we had some extremely good players on the team. We really did. We
So
had,
you're excited
big
about
back
62?
Absolutely.
And you know you got a chance to go for the SEC championship again. You're not worse.
No, we're going to be, you know, we're going to be a good ball club, and we thought we should win it again. I mean, we weren't arrogant or anything, you know. We were pretty humble, and one of the things that helped us an awful lot, one of the guys who wound up losing his starting job made the All-SEC sophomore team the year before. So we moved in some good people,
Right.
you know, and we had good people playing behind us that pushed us every single day. I mean, you couldn't take a day off because we had people could play, and we had really good depth. So we knew we were going to be a good, you know, a good basketball team.
Did you have, you were listening to the interview with Barney a while ago, and Barney was a starter for 3 years, but he said he never sure until the coach read off his name whether he's going to be starting. Did you have a little bit of that there? No, he had 7 or 8 great players.
We had some people that could play. I
Could play.
mean, we really did. We had, you know, some size and some people. We had J.D. Gamble there who never really had a outstanding college career, never got to play a lot. But he was a good basketball player, and we had a whole bunch of people like that could play. And yeah, but we thought we should win the SEC my junior year. You know, we had a taste of it, and that was our goal, and we worked pretty hard for it. And that probably might have been our best team. My senior year, we might have got a little senior-itis and a little complacent, but we were 24-1.
Your
That year, my junior year,
62.
and won the SEC pretty handily. Beat Kentucky at Kentucky that year.
And that's always a big win.
Big win for Kentucky, boy. It really was. They had beat us my sophomore year. Kentucky came to Starkville, and it was pretty early in the year, and they had Billy Lickert, Roger Newman, and who were both really good players. Newman was an outstanding player, and they actually beat us at Mississippi State. And I don't know whether this is a true story or not. You know, I've noticed where coaches may tell a story or two along the way, but supposedly UK left a wreath in our locker room. You know, one of those funeral wreaths in our locker room, in their visiting team's locker room.
In Lexington.
No, this was in Starkville, my sophomore year.
Oh, okay.
So we kept the wreath. Coach McCarthy kept the wreath and reminded us and took the wreath with us back to Lexington the next year, my junior year, and reminded us of that a couple of times along the way. And so certainly it was a motivation when we played UK in Lexington, and we did win that ball game, and they did place the wreath on the goal there, I think. So you know, it was a big rivalry then. You know, UK would kind of dominate the league, although during that stretch of time, there was about 5 years there where Kentucky went to the NCAA tournament 2 or 3 of those years, but actually was not the league champion.
Mississippi State.
Mississippi State, Auburn won one year, so it was kind of a year in there when.
I think we were talking about it was like 5 years that they didn't win the NCAA, but they went. They didn't win the SEC, but
Yes,
they went to the
well,
NCAA.
probably they went 3 of those or 4 of those, something
yeah.
like that. They went in '59, I know, and I think Auburn won in '60, the SEC, and maybe Georgia Tech might have gone that year. And then in '61, to be honest, I'm not positive who went that year. But in '62, I know UK went. That was the year we beat them at UK in my junior year. And they may have gone 61 too. I can't really remember. But anyway, in '62, after we did not go, and there was a little more talk of us going that year. There was beginning to get a little pressure there, and the president was more receptive to it. But they still didn't step out and really take a stand. And
Let's go back here just stop for a second. You're 24-1. Got a heck of a ball club.
right,
You won the SEC really hands down. You beat Kentucky and Lexington. I mean, and even then, that was a big thing.
right.
It was almost up with winning the SEC championship because they just didn't lose very often. You've got to be thinking about this more and more now. This has got to be building a little bit. I mean, we got a ball club that can compete all across the country. What did players say?
Well, you know, I guess with what you've never had, you don't really know exactly what it is, but we thought a lot more about it, and we had a guy that I mentioned that was captain of our team. His name was Jack Berkshire. He was from Winfield, Iowa. Well, the NCAA regional was in Iowa City, Iowa, not too far from Winfield. So I went home with Jack. Jack and I were good friends, and I went home with Jack, and I went to the NCAA regional. They got tickets out there. I think Western Kentucky was there, UK was there, and let's see, Ohio State was there, and I've forgotten who the other one was. But anyway, I got to see UK play in the NCAA regional there at Iowa City, and I'm sitting there thinking, this should have been us. We won the SEC, we deserved the honor. We should have been able to go and be here. And after seeing that, it was sort of like going to the state tournament. You know, in '58, you get hungry for it. You realize what you're missing, I guess. So that was Jack's senior year. He was actually a senior, so he didn't have an opportunity to go. But after that, I certainly wanted to go to the tournament and felt a little bit better maybe. Still didn't really think we had a chance. I think we would have probably been a better ball club my senior year if we had thought we could get to go to the tournament, might be able to go far in the tournament. I mean, during those last 2 years, we were ranked, you know, in the top 5 or the top 10, you know, most of the year. So we you know, knew we would be competitive anyway. And but going into the senior year, we still figured that the SEC, winning the SEC was the goal we were going to be able to accomplish, and that was probably going to be it.
McCarthy talk about it at all?
He didn't dwell on it with the team. I mean, he just said, boys, we'd like to go and we're trying to go, but you know, and that's about all that was ever really said about it. And it wasn't until later in the year that we began to realize that there might be a chance, but it's still, you know, if you read the papers, the politicians were against it. And ultimately, the Board of Regents voted 8-8. They tied on a vote that would allow us to
63
go.
we're talking about.
63, yes.
Well, let's get into that 63. So you got senior class coming back, a lot of experience. You've won 2 straight SEC championships, so it's no reason to think you're not going to be as good as you was the first 2 years,
Right.
And you are. But I never quite made that connection, Joe Dan, that you've won it twice and you didn't get to go anyplace. And that motivation is, and today we kind of look at it, what your goal there is. In high school, it's to go to the state championship, play in the state tournament. College is to play in the NCAA. That's the goal. And I never thought that at the high school level, we never dreamed of that I could win the region, but if they had black guys playing up there, hell, we couldn't go.
Well, that would have been the case.
That would have been the case, you know. And you don't understand this because as a junior, you've already played against the black team. Didn't have no problems. It was just another basketball game.
A lot of the players on the team had. Most of the Mississippi players had not. But we had players from Illinois, Iowa. We had players from up in, I think we had one player that was out of Michigan. So we had some players that had played against black players. I'd also played against Hopkinsville Addicts in baseball, you know, and so it wasn't a team thing. Even the Mississippi players, you know, that was never discussed or anything like that. Everybody's ready to go. But we still didn't have, and like I said, sometimes you can get seniors, sometimes you can get a little complacent. I don't mean we were bad, you know. I mean, we played, but we lost probably 3 or 4 games. There was no reason for us to lose, by maybe not being as prepared and playing as hard as we should have. We lost in the Sugar Bowl tournament down in New Orleans. The interesting thing about it is we played all the way from Virginia all the way down the coast to Texas. We played teams all the way up and down there. And none of those teams in the ACC and the SEC, you know, I look back, we used to go to Houston and play the University of Houston. At that time, Guy Lewis didn't have any black players. If you know, historically, he got Phi Lambda Gamma and was one of the first ones, you know, that really integrated out in that southwestern area. But at that time, he didn't have any players either. So none of the ACC, none of the other schools from Virginia to Texas, around Florida and all through there were no black players at the major college. They were still the predominantly black colleges.
You know, looking back, Joe Dan, of course, Kentucky, which we all grew up in, was integrated in '57.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you came from an area, Western Kentucky, didn't have a lot of blacks, so you had no problems. The same thing, I was from Central Kentucky, we had blacks integrated right into the system almost nonchalantly,
Mm-hmm.
although it didn't mean that there wasn't incidents.
Right.
You're always going to go someplace. But a lot of people, especially for today's viewers, they're not going to realize that in the early '60s, integration had taken place in Kentucky, but south of Kentucky, it wasn't going very smoothly down there. And there wasn't, I don't know, I know I went to school in Tennessee, '61, '62, and '63, same time you were in Mississippi. We played against them, we didn't play against any blacks. You didn't even talk about it. It just was an unwritten rule, it was there. And I'm trying to get into when do we start seeing that little change. And of course, what happened was in '63, we want to get into that a little bit. Mississippi State, a major college, a great basketball club, made a monster step forward. May have been the biggest thing that broke integration in the South. It was huge. And having gone to school there, you didn't talk about it much, but you knew back here it was, and you've already said the main thing that happened, we weren't as good because we knew that once we won the championship, we weren't going anyplace.
Well,
and that goal had been limited to you. But what I want to get into is how the coaches and the president and how all that turned, because we can look back now, 30 some years later, and at the time, that was an incredible monster step, because you put a huge amount of pressure on on the rest of the SEC and the Deep South. And the SEC is the Deep South. So you're saying, we're going to go play in the SEC tournament. We're going to go play in the NCAA tournament. That was a monster step. And not only that, now if you're playing against them, and they got great players, we're going to have to make the next step and ease out there and get us some players in here too. So it was a monster turning point. And I don't think people realize the significance of what your coach, your president, and from your perspective, being on the team, I know you don't know all the workings that went on in the background, but how did that come about, and who was instrumental in saying, we need to be playing in the NCAA?
Well, I think Dr. Colvard, and he wrote a book about it. D.W. Colvard was our president, and he understood that in order for the university to go forward, you know, there were beginning to be some, I guess, restrictions or potential restrictions on federal monies and a lot of things like that. He also understood that, you know, Mississippi was only using half of their human capital, the resources that they had. But as far as the university was concerned, he felt like that was keeping the university from going and becoming prominent in less of a regional university and more of a countrywide university that was a contributor. So it was probably his willing to step out there. Obviously it was a career move from him. he had to know he was risking his career, and he actually didn't
It was
stay.
a high-risk move, wasn't
He
it?
actually didn't stay at the university but a few years afterwards, and went to become president of another university, University of North Carolina, Charlotte, which they were just starting at that time, and he went there to build that university. But he risked a lot of his prestige on that. And Ole Miss, most of the other schools in the SEC probably would have gone to the NCAA tournament, even though they didn't have any black players on their teams. And I think Auburn won one year and didn't go, so Alabama and Mississippi might have been the two states that sort of had that unwritten rule. I'm not sure. I think Vanderbilt, I guess, I don't know whether Tennessee would have gone. I'm not positive about that. But anyway, Coach McCarthy then obviously had enough success. This was going to be the 4th SEC championship in 5 years. And so he began to really push for it. And
He's actually up in Adolph Rupp's category right now.
A lot of support there. And the university community, the students, the faculty, they were all much for us going to participate in the tournament. There were about 300 students. Went over to the president's house one night and asked him to allow us to go. And he came out and talked with them and said, well, we're considering and seeing what we're going to be able to do. And so even then, we still knew the sentiment, and particularly in the powers that be, the politicians and that sort of thing, was against us going. I mean, there wasn't any question about that. And so it wasn't until the last game of the season, and we actually were tied for the SEC lead the last game of the season. And Coach said, now if you beat Ole Miss, we'll once again have the automatic bid. And that day we found out that if we won, we were going to go. And what had happened, the Board of Regents had met, and they had voted to allow us to go. They tied 8-8 on that. But then they came back with another vote on a resolution to allow the president of the university to make the decision to put the heat totally on Dr. Carter. And they passed that resolution 9-7. So, the ball was in his court now. And when we heard that, we knew we were going to go because he had indicated to us.
How did it make you feel?
Well, we were excited. I mean, we still, I guess we were still, it really didn't sink in. They didn't tell us to, the day of the game. And we went up and we did beat Ole Miss, obviously, and wound up winning the SEC by a couple of games. I don't know if Vanderbilt or somebody lost the last game of the season, and so we wound up winning by 2 games. But had we lost and somebody else won, we would have tied again. And I think in that case we were going to lose. So anyway, after we found that out, as soon as we did win that ball game and we knew we were going, then it began to build up and the excitement began to build up. However, almost immediately the governor comes on and says, I'm opposed to them going. And a Mississippi State cheerleader named Billy Phipps, he's an ex-Mississippi State cheerleader who's now in the legislature, and he actually introduced a resolution in the legislature that we could not use public money to play in the thing. And there was
rumors. This was a former Mississippi State
cheerleader. Yeah, and there was rumors that the sheriff in Hinds County had they petitioned for an injunction. Well, actually, Hinds County was in Jackson,
out there in the capital.
And so they petitioned down there, and that's where they filed the writ of injunction and all of those things. Of course, as players, we weren't seeing those. We were reading about it in the paper, and we knew there was still maybe some possibility we weren't going. So we didn't have our hopes totally up. We continued to practice and prepare, but as far as us really 100% knowing we were going to get to go, we probably really didn't at that time, even though they had already said. one day on campus, I was walking across campus, and I just wanted to go play basketball. I wasn't thinking too much about the significance of it or what it might do for the university. I had an English professor, Dr. Holland, who I had as a freshman. Didn't even know he knew we had a basketball team. I didn't realize that he was a fan at all, and I'm not sure that he was. But he stopped me and he said, "Joe Dan," said, "you tell the players that not to worry about that injunction." Said, "We've got enough private funds pledged that if Dr. Carwood and Coach McCarthy want to go play in the tournament, we've got plenty of money for us to go play." So after that, I kind of stopped and thought, this may be a little more of a deal than I thought it was here. There's some other things going on there, and of course, Ole Miss, James Meredith was admitted to Ole Miss in '62, the law school, and they had a riot, had to call out the National Guard and all of those things. So the sentiment was much better, and on a college campus, we were pretty much isolated from that. I mean, we didn't have, in Starkville, there wasn't a whole lot of things going on or anything at that time. So it was kind of interesting, that really we were isolated from all of the things that were going on, even though we had a kind of an idea of what was going on around the state.
How did you had some teammates at that time that probably hadn't played against blacks?
Except on the playground somewhere, probably.
Yeah, that's right.
Back home.
But probably, and I don't know what the percentage was half, and some of you had played against blacks,
Yeah.
and didn't think anything about it. Was there any of the players, what were some of their sentiments, the ones that hadn't played against black, did you ever talk
No,
about it? Or just everybody
wanted to go play in the tournament.
Go play another ball game.
They wanted to go play in the NCAA tournament. That was
That's the only thing they wanted to do.
The thing that
if it's all black, let's go.
Didn't make any difference to anybody there, and most everybody had experiences or that type thing. But maybe some of the parents of the Mississippi players or something, but it was strictly a non-issue, and it was never discussed
with
the team at all. Yeah, and with the university, I mean, we had great support from students, from professors, from almost anyone affiliated with the university. I mean, they had pep rallies. You saw them. Well, we hope you guys get to go. It was just at the university. That was like I said, maybe it's just a different setting. I think.
I think it's in visiting with you in the past, Joe Dan. I think it was looking back, and I think when you're in the middle, you don't see it, and it's kind of like when you're in the woods, you don't see the trees. But I think coming back 35 years later and looking back in there, the decision that your college president made is huge.
Right.
And he had his butt all the way out as far as you can get it. And the board gave him no support. They just said, we're going to put the ball in your court. If it turns out bad, it's all you.
That's exactly right.
That was a huge decision for him and for the state of Mississippi. In other words, they did it. Okay. And of course, McCarthy, and he had worked his way up into a position of power, of prominence. He was a prominent coach. And gosh, living in Kentucky and knowing him, and of course being a huge Kentucky fan, which we all were, we all hated Babe McCarthy because he was kicking our butt on a regular basis. And so those two men, I'm saying, and I guess I'm not trying to take words, but they were leading the charge with the president being in the front.
Absolutely, and there were some supporters, obviously. We had a lot of people that wanted Mississippi State to go play in the tournament, and I'm sure a lot of those thought it would be good for the state of Mississippi, but there was a lot of them that wanted to keep the status quo. And after we went, and there was a lot of stories about it. In 1964, Mississippi State integrated. Took the first black student at Mississippi State, and it was just strictly a non-issue. I mean, there was not even any press or anything, and obviously our going. I mean, Joe Dean last night at the Hall of Fame talked about athletics being really a part of life, and I think if we go back and look at some of the changes in our country, sports has certainly played a large part of that. And it wasn't totally smooth in Kentucky. I'm not sure exactly what year that this happened, but I know that the Celtics were going to play the Hawks in Lexington, if you remember that, and there was an instant there where they were not able to be served at the same hotel or something, and some of the Celtic players left and went back. Bill Russell and some of that.
I think the whole team picked up and went left.
Well, no, I think they stayed and played. Ramsey was on that team, and I think part of them stayed and played, and part of them left. And Hagan was on the Hawks, and so, you know, it was just a different era, a different time. There were different things all over the country, and so it wasn't just Mississippi.
No, that's right.
But it was in the South, and there was a different culture there, and you know, I just.
And this was when it was starting to change.
Yeah,
and I want to get into that a little bit. Hold on, just a second. Let's take a little break. Joe Dan, the president said you're going. Is everything working? Is 100%? Are you comfortable that there's going to be no problems? And of course, this is the first time this has happened. So, what was in the team and the president and Coach McCarthy? What's going on with you guys? I know you're excited. Are you 100% sure that you're going to be there? Okay.
Well, I don't think any of us was 100% sure, because the papers were writing and the politicians were making speeches, and we were hearing rumors that the sheriff in Hinds County had a injunction to deliver. So Dr. Coward and the vice president of the university left the state. The athletic director and Coach McCarthy left the state. They went to Nashville. So the day that we were,
so they can't be delivered any injunction. They're out of the state. So
I didn't know this at the time, but afterwards we found out the sheriff had actually come to Dr. Coward's house, the president's home on the campus, and talked to his wife, and she told him Dr. Coward was not there, and he said okay, and so he left. I don't think they made gigantic efforts to serve the injunctions, but even the day that we left, we actually sent the reserves. We sent the freshmen, 4 or 5 freshmen, we sent the managers, we sent the trainer, and a couple of reserves out to the plane. We had a charter plane flying out of Starkville to see if anybody showed up. When nobody showed up, then the varsity, which had stayed at the dorm, we had some kind of a plan B. We were going to drive out. I don't know. I guess we thought the police couldn't catch us when we were driving. I don't know. We were incognito. But anyway, we wound up going out and getting on the plane without incident and flying to Nashville and picking up Coach McCarthy. And turns out Dr. Carver and the vice president had been in Memphis. And so we went to East Lansing, Michigan, at Michigan State. Is where the regional was played that year.
So first round. Tell me who's in the first round. Who's the 4 teams up there?
Well, Bowling Green, which had Howie Comize, and Loyola Chicago, which was the team that we played. They were the team that had the 4 players, and Bowling Green had
4 black starters.
Right. Bowling Green had actually beat Loyola Chicago.
During the year?
During the year, yes. And then I'm trying to think of who the other team is. I've got a senior moment here, I think. But anyway, those were we were there, Loyola was there, Bowling Green was there, and I'm trying to think, Bowling Green had Nate Thurman and Howie Comize.
They were a pretty fair ball club themselves.
Yeah. And
2 guys that turned out later to become great NBA. Yes, absolutely.
And so we got there. You
didn't get a weak pick.
No. It turned out Loyola Chicago, that was the first year they had ever played in the NCAA tournament also, even though they had played in NIT the year before. And so they had a little tournament experience. And they had also, at that time, the SEC had an automatic bid into the Final 16. I believe they selected 24 teams. And the independents like Loyola had to play a first round game against some of the OVC champions, or that type thing. There were 8 games around the state, the nation, to get the final 8 into the final 16. So there were just 4 teams at each one of the regionals, and Loyola Chicago had beaten Tennessee Tech. They'd beaten them something like 100 and something to 40 something. I mean, they had just obliterated them,
And Tech didn't have a terrible team.
No, I'm sure they didn't, and the
good
OVC was pretty good that time. This was just, they pressed and they were quick, and our coaches saw it, and they were good. I wish they hadn't even seen it, because they came back with all kinds of horror stories. But anyway, we got ready for the game there. We flew in, had practice, and there was all kinds of press there and everything. And
what was going on in the national media? Of course, everybody knew, the sports media did for certain, that Mississippi State had never played in the NCAA, and this was a big first for them. Was there much ado about that?
I can't really tell you. The TV wasn't very prominent back then. We had commercial appeal with Jackson, Mississippi papers. That's about all I was aware of. So from a player standpoint, I wasn't aware of a whole lot of things going on, other than, there was a lot of press at our practices, and we just had the one practice, and then got ready to play the game, the next night.
Along that line in 1966, we all remember this, UK is playing Texas Western, all white, all black, but in 1966, I don't remember ever thinking a thing about it. It was the Kentucky was all white, Texas Western. It was a ball game for the national championship. And today, 30 years later, there's a huge ado made about it, and I'm thinking, I don't remember reading any of that stuff 30 years ago. And I'm kind of thinking it was a news story because it was the first time you'd come out. People didn't know that.
Right.
And there was a change, and you had 3 years in a row or 3 earlier times. So it still was a story.
Yeah, and I think the fact that, everybody knew there had been efforts to keep us from going. I mean, that had received a lot of national attention.
Right.
I mean, Mother, and I can remember them, seeing it on TV and knowing all the things that were going on. And of course, they were uncertain whether we were going to get to go or not. And
but the
so
team itself was just a ball game.
It was a ball game. We knew it was a big deal just because we didn't know whether we were going to get to go or that sort of thing. But it was just a game, and I do remember we went out. I was captain of the team that year, and a guy named Jerry Hartness, who wound up playing in the ABA for a while. Their team, he was the captain of their team. And when I went out to shake hands with him, it just seemed like the whole court was surrounded with photographers. And when I met him later on, that was the same thing he said. He said, when we shook hands, I couldn't believe the number of flash bulbs that went off back then. He said that just the whole thing lit up to him, and that was exactly what my impression was, that, gosh, just everybody's taking pictures of this. And so, and I guess it, as I look back, and now Sports Illustrated a few years back put out that significant events of players and things like that, and that was one of the photographs that was put in that big book, was me shaking hands with Jerry Hartness. So I knew pretty much immediately it was a big game, and I'd like to say maybe we were overwhelmed and over-prepared and all that stuff, but we actually got out to a 7-0 lead, and then played a good ball game until about, 4 or 5 minutes ago, we were down 7, 8, 9, 10, something like that. I think it's about 8 or 10 point game at halftime. And we actually got back to 3, I think, in the second half. And, it was a competitive game, but they beat us, and then they obviously went on and won
They had a pretty fair ball club.
Won the national championship. Yeah, they had a couple of guys that had played. They had 2 players out of Nashville Pearl High School.
Right.
And had Jerry Hartness, had a guy named Johnny Egan was the only white guy on the team that played very much, and he was about 5'9" or something like that. So the game itself, we wound up losing. We wound up beating Bowling Green the next night in the consolation game. At that time, you had a consolation game, and so I didn't get to play against Bowling Green. I broke my hand in that game. Sometime during the game, I broke my hand. I didn't know about it until afterwards. I guess the adrenaline was flowing and that type of thing, and I broke a bone in my hand down there past my index finger joint. And so I didn't get to play in the consolation game, but we did beat them in that consolation game. So we were a good team, and hopefully, you always look back to, well, if we had been able to play a couple of years before and were a little more tournament experience and that sort of thing, maybe we would have done better. I don't know, but that's hindsight, because we got beat by the national champions, so maybe we weren't. Maybe it's another North Marshall all over. Maybe I'm just a slow learner. I don't know.
Joe Dan, that's a great story, and how it's hard for viewers today or young folks, even in college age, just don't have any understanding of how that all started to come about. There was a piece, ESPN or somebody did, maybe HBO, about how we started recruiting black athletes into the SEC. And few people realize that Barry Bryant was one of the first guys to promote that, because his team he had #1 football team. But he knew when he started competing against Southern Cal and some of these big teams around, he said, they're getting black players, are great athletes. He says, we don't get those athletes, we ain't gonna be able to compete against them. And he pushed his Alabama team to go out and play these teams and say, look, if you want us to be #1, we gotta be able to get the same caliber players they are. And all of those things took time. Nothing, you're not changing 100 or 200 years of history overnight. It doesn't happen. And I still look back, it's almost like Barney's 36-0, 61 years later. People don't realize that huge step that Mississippi State, that the president of the college and the basketball coach put themselves out on the limb. They were out there by themselves. And as you said, the players, we just wanted to play ball. We didn't care who it was. And the student body did too. The university did. But there was way more people sitting over here on the fringe that didn't want that barrier broken. But once this broken, you can't ever go back.
Yeah.
You can't go back. So it was a hugely historical time.
It really was. There's a number of things. In 2007, the NCAA flew the Mississippi State team, and they also flew the Loyola Chicago players and their families into Detroit, Michigan for the Midwest Regional. So that's the first time, I had met Jerry Hartness, but that's the first time that the two teams had been together
And talked.
and talked with their families, that sort of thing, since that game in '63, and this is 2007. So it was unreal, people said, well, they had principals and they had lawyers and we had principals and lawyers, and they had 6 or 7 guys there and we had about 10 or 11 guys there. And they had pressure on themselves too. The black community was telling them, don't you let those white guys beat us. Jerry Hartness said they actually had threats. The coach had threats about playing against us and making sure, so they had a different type pressure and a different type of a scenario that when we sat down and talked about it, I just really, really enjoyed it, and we keep in touch, and they made a documentary about it, A Game of Change, that they're still trying to circulate possibly to expand that. And so it was a very interesting time that the two teams got to sit there and talk and get to know one another and hear from their perspective and our perspective and get to visit then again with your teammates too. So it was
That had to be a great trip.
It was really, really a great thing that the NCAA did. After we got back from the game, we had a huge reception, just as if we'd won there on the campus. And like I said, in 1964, the first black student was admitted. 1968, only 5 years later, we recruited 2 black football players. And by then, I was the head basketball coach. I became head coach and played against Rough Grunts in '66. And I was recruiting black players for the basketball team also, although I never was successful in recruiting.
Things were starting to change fast, though, weren't they?
Yes.
And not, people always say, but not as fast as we want to, but they were changing fast. People don't realize how different it was. And the significance of that first step started the whole ball rolling. Once it started, it was like it was going down the hill and it just kept picking up speeds. I think you must be proud to have been a part of that. Not that you were a leader or we've got to do this, but just being a part of it and then looking, saying, this was pretty, and then looking back 30 years later, you realize that was really a historical moment.
Well, it's more than 30 now, I'm afraid, but there's no question about that. You know, I never considered myself a great player, but I was fortunate to play on great teams, both in high school and then in college. I went there with a group of guys that weren't really, we were kind of ragtags. We were kind of the underdog. Nobody on there much was heavily recruited. Leland Mitchell and Red Stroud went there on one-year scholarships, and I wasn't highly recruited, and the 3 of us wound up starting for 3 years, you know. So it was an
And having a
experience.
fairly significant record.
Yeah, I had a good record. We had, like I said, I played on good
3
teams.
SECs, that's not too bad.
And but looking back, you know, and then I stayed there as a coach and saw the changes that began in Mississippi. Some painful, some good, and but yeah, I was pleased to be a part of that. After I left Mississippi State, I came to Paducah Community College and had my first experience coaching black players. 11 of my 14 players were black at Paducah Community College, and I had a great experience there. I mean, I was fortunate. I was a pretty smart coach down at Paducah. I had players that went to Oklahoma and Memphis State and Southern Illinois University, and so I had some good players there at Paducah Community College, and seems like you win more games when you got good players.
You know, Coach Rivers tells me he gets way smarter when he's got good players.
Absolutely.
He's just incredibly smart and wins a lot more.
Mm-hmm. We went to the national tournament both years that I was there, and you know, we had good players. I mean, that's all it was to it.
From Paducah, you went down to Mercer
University.
and located in
Macon, Georgia.
Macon, Georgia.
Had a good year there. We were 17-8 and were considered for the NIT.
And then you started to come back and concentrate on your administration, getting into education back in the state of Kentucky.
Well, I didn't have quite all of the big shoe contracts and all those things going on at that time, and I enjoyed my year at Mercer, but my son was getting about ready to start school. And so I really had to make a decision. And coaching, you gotta want to coach in college. I mean, it's you gotta know, you gotta move, you gotta do a lot of things. And so I decided to get back into the public schools. In 1975, I took a job with Thurman County High School. Coached there 4 years, and after 2 years, started going into administration. And I became a principal there. I was there 16 years. I became a principal about 8 years, the last 8 years. And then I went to Williamstown Independent as principal, and then became superintendent for a couple of years. Went to Mason County, and I think the reason that I left Mason County, and I kid about this, but we didn't get to go to the state tournament the first year that I went there as superintendent. We lost in 3 overtimes in the finals of the regional that year. So I knew that you couldn't last very long in Mason County without going to the state tournament. At least I didn't think you
Even if
could.
you're the superintendent.
You're the superintendent, you know, and so anyway, that's not exactly right, but anyway, I left there after 3 years and took
The thought occurred, though, didn't it?
took the job in Morgan County, and I've been there 12 years and just retired July 1 as superintendent of schools there.
Joe Dan, what's it's been so much fun visiting with you today, and especially talking about such a historical time. But my question is, and you've been an outstanding athlete, played on some great teams, winning the SEC 3 times in a row, which not very many people could say that.
That's all you could do at that time.
That's all you
can
could do. That's right. And going to the NCAA and participating. And then being a head coach and a school administrator. How do those two, coach and administrator, how did those affect your lives, and how did you enjoy those 2 jobs, and what was the difference in them?
Well, I probably enjoyed coaching. I also enjoyed being a high school principal. And I think coaching is a very good training ground. I know there's a lot of folks that think coaches are jocks and they probably ought not be administrators or educators or that type of thing, but I think band directors and coaches, you know, they get used to handling students, parents, communities, the whole thing, you know, they have to be, and they have to have pretty good PR skills, you know, and so I think it's a good training ground for that. And, but I enjoyed being a high school principal. I really did. I also enjoyed coaching. I missed the coaching when I got out of it, and it's the relationship you have with the players, the relationship you have with the coaches. You know, when I was coaching in the SEC, I got to play golf with Barry Bryant once. I got to go visit Adolph Rupp in Lexington, Kentucky. You know, guys like Norm Sloan and Chris Maravich and you know, just Pistol Pete. I coached against Pistol Pete. I mean, those are things that athletics allowed me to do. Otherwise, I would have, you know, I'd have missed out on all those opportunities. So, from my standpoint, you also have a great influence. You know, Coach Bill Ferris, who was my high school coach, he influenced me tremendously. Coach McCarthy, obviously. A guy named Pharisee Wood, who, when I went to Thurman County, was the principal there, and I was the coach. Pharisee's been a great coach. So, in my life, in addition to my family and my mother and ministers who, particularly my grandfather, who introduced me to my faith, and you know, I became a Christian through a lot of his leadership. Those people that influenced, but most of the people that have influenced me in my life have been coaches, and hopefully. When I go around and talk to other people, you're going to find people who didn't participate in athletics past high school. They'll tell you that the coaches had a tremendous amount of influence on them, you know, and I think it's because you have an opportunity to have an impact on their lives. They know whether you're trying to help them or whether you're trying to hurt them or whether you're in their corner and want them to do better. And they pick up on that quickly. Don't trick the kids. You know, the old saying about they got to know that you care, you know, first before you can get them to do anything, you know. I think that's exactly right. You know, they don't care what you know till they know that you care. And I think that's where you have that opportunity in coaching, as well as being a principal or a teacher or band director or any number of jobs in education. And I consider education a calling, almost like being a minister. And if you don't feel that way about it, I think you ought to find something else. I think it's the same thing with being a coach. You know, you truly have to have a passion for coaching and young people. And so I think it's almost like a calling. I think you have to feel that's your niche in life, and that's what you're supposed to be doing. And I think most of the people that have faith believe that that's what God wants them to do, and I think that's always been some of the way that I approached it. And also, I think our generation, we had a little different work ethic. We had a little different expectations. You know, you had God, family, and your work. And sometimes the priorities might have changed, that we were so dedicated to our work and took a lot of pride in it. And I think that's one of the things that I learned with sports is if you want to be better, you just got to work hard if you've got any ability at all.
Joe Dan, we did a interview with Corky Withrow, who you know, a great ball player from '56. You know, and he said the very exact same thing. In 1950s, work ethic was God, family, and ball.
Yeah.
And that's what it was, you know. And it was. And thank you so much for being with us today and giving us an opportunity to spend some time with you. It's been great, and we've enjoyed every minute of it. We got some more things that we want to talk about, and I hope we can get together and go in on a couple of other things.
Well, I guarantee you I'll be available, and I'd just like to, on behalf of all us old timers, the work that you're doing is pretty unique. The time and the effort and the resources that you're putting into sort of documenting the 50s and 60s and 30s and 40s that you're all the way back to. I can tell you personally I appreciate it, but I can tell you there's a whole lot of us old guys out there that really appreciate it, Charles.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Joe Dan. Thank you so much. Okay.